Escape from New York by Kevin Wilson is a game inspired by the classic movie by the same title, in which, of course, we have a dystopian Manhattan, we have our good man Snake, in the Italian translation that I watched, they called him Hyena, I guess it was more euphonic in Italian. He needs to go to Manhattan, find the president, and get him out of there within a limited amount of time. This is a semi-cooperative game, also solo-friendly. The semi/cooperative game comes on the fact that each player will take their turn, and then New York will take a turn as an AI, and players can choose to win together, or a single player can go for a single victory, and players can also steal stuff from one another. So you can make it as cooperative or as backstabbing as you want. Again, since there is an AI and it's possible to win a solo victory even in multiplayer, you can play it solo. And I played it solo only. We have some iconic characters such as Maggie or Snake, of course, and each character will have a board such as this one. You have 3 tiles, and they're different sets. You get a random set of 3 tiles like that, which you place on your character, and each has different requirements on the back. At the beginning of the game, you flip the first one face up, so you know the requirement. You will need to usually collect goods and or kill prisoners. When you meet the requirement of that tile, you remove it, unlocking the ability of your next level. And then you reveal what the conditions to level up again are, like so. And leveling up is one of the things that you need to do to win the game. You also need to complete 2 personal missions represented by cards. You receive 2 at the beginning of the game. Some missions may become impossible to complete as the game continues, but there are also cards and effects that allow you to change the missions. In any case, you need to fulfill both, and one has to do with something that you need to find, and one has to do with leaving the place. And of course, again, you need to leave the place after somebody has found the president card, or after the timer has reached like almost the end. Of course, if you're playing solo, that someone has to be you. If you're playing with other people, somebody else may have found it, you complete your stuff, you still win. And this is this is kind of very important because, again, in the multiplayer version, players can combine basically the requirements for winning in order to have a shared victory. This is a card-driven game with a tiny element of deck building, in which you will have your cards, and the general idea is this. Again, each player will take a turn, then New York takes a turn. So a player takes a turn, New York takes a turn, next player does the same, their turn, and New York, and continue like that. During a player's turn, you will choose 2 cards, say these 2, and you choose the order in which they're played. You're committed to them. After that, you will resolve the first card, do what it says, then resolve the second one, do what it says. And that's the basic idea. I said there's a tiny element of deck building because when you level up, you will take some special cards. You will add a special card each time to your deck, and they are, of course, to give you better actions. Also, simply, that means that you deplete your hand of cards less often. This is important because you don't routinely get the cards back after you play them. Say, next turn, I play 2 more cards, and I continue like that. There may be game effects that let you take some cards back into your hand, though. You can choose, optionally, during your turn, to get your entire hand of cards back by discarding a timer card. You will prepare a deck of timer cards at the beginning of the game, you reveal it, do what it says, which sometimes is a good thing. Sometimes there's good stuff in there, and then you discard it, and that's for the timer. Of course, if the timer deck runs out, then the players lose the game. The deck is also used to represent basically your life points. When the enemies attack you, Each time that you lose a life, you discard a random card from your hand. Discard a random card from your hand, and that's the way it is. Maybe also you discarded the card that would allow you to get the cards back for free, so that's annoying. So that's the simple idea. When you get hit, you will have fewer cards. You are more likely to have to use the timer to pick up all of your cards, and that's the general idea of the game. I like this as a clever idea because it allows players to get hit and killed and get penalties. They never reduce their agencies. You don't skip your turn. You simply get a timer. You use a timer to get the cards back into your hand. You may have noticed these icons here. These icons here on the cards, because after you play and you resolve your cards, so you will have produce a certain number of noise icons. There are 2, for example. This was my turn. To understand the noise icons, we move to the New York board. Let's put it here. There we go. Which is used to regulate the actions of the bad stuff that's going on in New York. Prisoners and bosses that are trying to kill you, effects that will happen, and they're usually bad, and so on and so forth. So, the board is used. There are 3 bosses that can enter the game, and the bosses have a certain number of life points. When they enter the game, for example, the Duke enters the game, and the Duke will enter the game because the president is held by the Duke. So you need to meet him for sure in order to find the president card. 2, when they enter the game, you place their token on the board, following instructions on the card. This is how much damage they generate, the range at which they project damage, how much they move, and how many life points they have. When they take damage from you, generated from the cards, it simply goes down. Pretty simple that way. We're talking about noise though, right? This is the noise tracker. So at the end of a turn, you will move the noise tracker by 1 for each noise that you created with the icons on the cards that you play. After that, New York takes its turn, and it does so by using this deck of cards that may have other cards added to it later as the game continues. You see the number that there is, so this would be the deck of cards at the beginning of my turn. You see the number there. Well, actually, first thing that you do is when it's New York's turn, you take the first card of the New York deck, you discard it, and you advance the tracker by 1. That is an interesting effect of not every card is used when you go into the deck, so there's unpredictability, and you shouldn't see the card that is next there because there may be game effects based on that diagram there. After that, if New York, the number there, has enough noise to buy that card, it will resolve it. For example, if the noise was at 6 right now, the card says 4, I go down to 2, I look at that card and I do what it says. Pretty simple. If it doesn't, suppose we were 3, all that happens is that noise goes up by 1 and I discard it. That's the New York turn. It's pretty simple. Either 1 card going up by 1 automatically, or if an effect is not resolved, a second card is discarded for the tracker to go up again. These little effects here, these little cubes here, simply there are effects that will move them from there to there, and that will cause the time tracker to move faster, and then you reset that. It's just a simple effect, an abstract idea to keep track of progress. So that's the general idea that we have there. Play your cards, resolve your effects, move around. Move around what, where, and to do what. You move around this board. That looks a little bit drab, honestly. And you will move around, and most of what you do is to move and kill. That's pretty much the idea. Those are the 2 actions. Oh, here we put Maggie on the thing. A lot, so you have these red cards that are placed in specific marked locations at the beginning of the game, and they represent points of interest, and one of them represents the Duke's hideout with the president. So you simply have to move around and flip these ones until you find the one with the president. Then the Duke will show up telling you what he thinks about your little operation, and you gotta get the card and get the heck out of there. And again, where you go there, if you're gonna leave with a Gulfire, if you're gonna leave from a bridge, one of the bridges, or on a raft, it all depends on what your mission is. So, when you move, because a card says that you are going to do so, just like that, dynamics in your space, move one space, then reveal one empty space next to you. Pretty much every time that you move, or many times that you move, you will reveal a card in an empty space next to you if there is one. This is important because the effects on the cards must be resolved entirely. Can't just move and say, yeah, no, thank you, I'm not gonna actually reveal any card. I'm good. Can't do that. Because these cards will bring up all the enemies and challenges that you have. So suppose I just moved and it says I need to reveal a card in a space next to me. I also need to move into spaces that have tiles. I can't move into an empty space. So suppose I want to go there and I say, okay, fine, I'm going to draw that card. And there are two decks of cards, one for the general New York and one for the Central Park area, which is in that section of the board. So I moved, I need to draw a card, and I simply place it there. Oh, that's super lucky. I get a building, I get activated at the end of my player turn, if I'm there, and I resolve the effects. I suppose I wasn't quite as lucky, or I was definitely lucky, and that's the card that I drew. There are icons there, yay, icons, and that icons tells me that there are goods there, and there's a prisoner there. And again, either with the exception of some game effects, finding supplies, finding enemies, finding the occasional manhole that allows prisoners and or characters to move faster. That's the general idea. And suppose I moved there, I had a card that tells me that I inflicted damage at range 1. That's perfectly fine, because right now I'm range 0, and so I could attack that, and I could also attack the adjacent spaces if there were enemies there. And so I simply removed that, and that's all that there is. Combat is you remove stuff using game effects from your cards because it says so. You may also have weapons, and they allow you to discard ammo tokens from them to inflict damage at range 1. So that gives a little bit more flexibility. And that's the general idea. Now, you may have noticed that there are some tokens here. When you simply explore that card, the token counts as an extra icon on the card, and that's all that there is. Usually most of these landscape cards here, you will draw them because a card says put one and reveal it in the adjacent space. These ones here, the points of interest, you need to enter them. And that one, for example, is a gathering with 3 prisoners. It also says put case 3 here, and we do so because there will be cards associated with case tokens, and you place them there. Again, you need to find the president card. There are a lot of other effects. You may find a card that is controlled by a prisoner, and that's suppose we're here and I found a car. Bang, bang, I inflict damage to the prisoner in the car by prisoner. Now that's my car, and I place a matching base there. It's not going in. There you go. A matching base there. Now I'm Maggie on the car, and I move faster. There are a lot of little tiny rules about this and that and how things work. Luckily enough, the general engine is pretty simple because it remains. Play 2 cards, optionally discard a timer card to get your cards back in hand. During your turn, possibly use a weapon and spend ammo to inflict some damage. Resolve the cards. didn't tell you about how the enemies attack you. It's pretty simple. There's a phase in your turn that there are enemies in range, they attack you and you lose a point of life for each damage that they inflict you. During your turn, enemies also, then you resolve the New York phase, and that's what I wanted to tell you. Why these cards are important. During the New York phase, you also move enemies into your space if there are enemies in the tile indicated by the arrows. So for example, this enemy is next to me, but there isn't an arrow going from their tile to mine, and so it doesn't matter. But if this is the card that's on top of the deck during the New York phase of my turn, then that person feels like joining the gathering there. Take your turn playing 2 cards, plus other effects, resulting in your turns in which they will use this deck here and spend noise, and continue like this until either somebody wins the game or everybody loses it. I saw the movie back in the day, and I remember enjoying it a great deal. I also haven't seen it since. I only watched it once, so I would say that I enjoyed it, but I'm not like a rabid fan of it, and so I guess that I'm evaluating the game without the glasses of nostalgia or idolizing it as a fan. So as for the game, the rulebook is not great. It made it pretty difficult for me to learn the game. There are some things that just don't match the components at first sight. It says, hey, each hero has 3 special cards. And I look at the 5 special cards and I'm confused. I don't know what to do. Later at the end, it says, oh, and we added 2 because of Kickstarter goals. Well, you should have reconciled that and tell me at the beginning each hero has 5 cards because this is how the game works. The rules give you a certain idea of a general idea of the game, then a general idea of the player turn and New York turn, then another section with New York more in detail and another section with the player turn more in detail. There's no keyword index, so if I'm looking at what is the effect of the manholes, I don't know where to find it. There is a token that I saw on the board that looked through the rule book. Is not shown on the rulebook. I didn't know what that was. They describe it in words. They don't show you the icon. So, very subpar. So the first time I played the game, I wasn't super enjoyable because I was going through the rulebook all the time. And you do have that element of like fiddliness there. So many different effects that work slightly different. How do those cards work? That kind of card, how does it work? When you get to execute it, there are a lot of gray areas there. And a rule book like that did not make it easy. So the first game was just procedural. The second game, I was able to play it, and it flowed. I don't know if I played it correctly in every aspect, probably not, but at least it was flowing. And then I started having a problem that I thought may happen, which is by the second game, I was already a little bit bored because the game felt a bit samey. I don't see a lot of replay value here. And so you have a general script that will happen every time. You need to look for certain things. You need to look for the president. You need to look for the way to get the heck out of there. You have different missions, but a mission may be get out from that bridge instead of that bridge, or get out from the raft, which is the token I couldn't identify initially. And so it's not vastly different missions. Find this instead of that. And it's surprising because the general core engine is one that I like very much. That hand management with an element of deck building almost felt like Undaunted. The fact that penalties have to do with cards and do not reduce your agency. Those are important things to me in game design. But your agency still felt surrounded by a lot of randomness and still led me to move and attack or attack and move and spend an ammo to eliminate a prisoner. I felt that I was doing more or less the same things every time in different parts of the board and looking for a card with the president that could be found basically randomly. So, learning the game wasn't easy, and when I was ready to finally play without looking at the rulebook all the time, the game already felt pretty samey. So I'm not gonna recommend it for solo play. Now, it may appeal to contentious groups where backstabbing play is valued. I think then when you add the diplomacy, the backstabbing, the coalition making, and then you break the deal, then the flatness of the New York elements maybe forgiven, because then the people are on the table are creating a complex and interesting swinging diplomatic situation. But the game per se feels pretty flat. If you played multiplayer and you add the diplomatic element, it may be fun. I'm not gonna play that way because incidentally I don't like semi-cooperative. That is entirely a personal opinion. I like cooperative, I like competitive. Working with somebody and backstabbing them later, or winning alone in a game that has a cooperative option, I don't like it. That's just my thing. Again, as a diplomatic game, maybe. As a solo game, or in general as an assessment of the game engine, I found it a game that is not easy to learn. And once you have learned it, there isn't that much going on really.